I was always into history. Maybe I read a Hamilton book when I was a little kid. I don't remember. I remember reading about Franklin, Lincoln, Jefferson, Washington. I don't know if there were really any kids' books on Hamilton back then. Chernow really got me interested in Hamilton again, but that was before I was writing history books. That was just when I was just a student of history. But really, it was when I was writing my previous book, Angry Moms and Founding Fathers, that every step of the way, there's Hamilton. There's only two people that's everywhere. I mean, the war, during the Confederation, the move to the Constitution, the first government, only two people that's everywhere. It's Washington and Hamilton. And not only everywhere, they're everywhere together. Jefferson's not always there. Sometimes he's on the other side. Franklin, of course, passes away in 1790. So Hamilton is this person who's everywhere. And he's helping Washington. Washington, everybody loves Washington. Everybody respects Washington. Hamilton's helping him every step of the way. Yet how come Hamilton's so controversial? Hamilton, according to some people, is this evil genius. But if he's an evil genius and everything Washington did is great, and Washington did what Hamilton recommended, it just doesn't make sense. So when I was writing my previous book, I'm like, somebody really needs to address this. Of course, really, Steve Knott does address a lot of that in Alexander Hamilton Persistence of Myth. But as I was reading both Knott and Chernow and all the other works, there wasn't just a debate over whether Hamilton was good or bad. There's a debate over the facts of his life. What year was he born? Did he fight in this battle? Did he fight in that battle? I mean, there's so much that's just not known. And so I set out to discover all those things. At first, I thought I was going to write one volume on Hamilton's entire life. Now I wrote one volume on a small portion of his life. That's a very interesting topic because there's, again, so much misinformation. Washington, Lafayette, Knox, Hamilton, of course, McHenry, Shaw, a bunch of other people, the Dragoons, they're coming back. They were at a conference. They're coming back, and they want to visit West Point. Benedict Arnold at this time is already the commander of West Point, a command he sought for a specific reason. A lot of historians have written, maybe about 50% of historians have written, that Hamilton was sent ahead to Arnold's headquarters at the Robinson House to notify Benedict Arnold that they were on the way. About half the historians write that. It's not true. You have to look through all the first-hand accounts of this trip. Lafayette wrote the day after that two of Washington's aides were sent to Benedict Arnold's headquarters. Then there's an anonymous letter in the newspaper that says that I and I think he was Major Shaw at the time, who was Samuel Shaw, were sent ahead to Arnold's headquarters. Well, this person who wrote this anonymous letter later wrote that I and Hamilton, or Hamilton and myself, did something. So obviously this letter wasn't written by Hamilton. So we have two people that were sent supposedly by Washington. One of them is the author of this letter, the other one is Shaw. Dr. James Thatcher, who's about 20 miles away, writes in his diary, either the same day or a few days later, that it was James McHenry and Samuel Shaw who were sent to headquarters. And we also know that this James McHenry is the one with Hamilton who later went on this mission that McHenry wrote about. So half the historians say that Hamilton was sent ahead. He wasn't. It's relatively unimportant. Now comes the juicy stuff. Every historian who writes about this says that Alexander Hamilton was at Arnold's headquarters, the Robinson House, that he received the packet. Now, there are some historians who don't write anything. They just write, the packet came, Washington opened it. They don't say who received it. But everyone who says about someone receiving it says that Hamilton received it. But there is no contemporary primary sources that report that. All the sources that report that were written years later. Most of them were by Lafayette. Now, Lafayette, he's the one who wrote the letter saying that the two aides were sent ahead. He did not mention that in the letter he wrote the day after. He only mentioned that in 1820s, or in his memoirs in the 1810s, and then he visits America in the 1820s. He mentions it to James Fenimore Cooper, who writes it. So these are memories, distant memories. So again, I looked through all the primary sources. You'll see in the back of the book, that's all there is, it's primary sources. So if Hamilton that night, after Benedict Arnold runs away during his treason, that night he writes a letter, he starts writing a letter to his wife. The next morning he finishes the letter. In it, he talks about how he had chased after Benedict Arnold. And when he returned, he saw Peggy Arnold in distress. It was only after Hamilton returned from chasing after Benedict Arnold that he saw Peggy Arnold in distress. If you read the accounts of what happened that day, Peggy Arnold was moaning and acting crazy, as some would say, in distress. Hamilton did not witness that. Hamilton was not there. He could not have received the packet, otherwise he would have seen her in distress. Not only that, one of Benedict Arnold's aides, if I remember, I think it was Varick, said that we all went to her assistance. So not only would Hamilton have been there to witness it, according to this aide, he would have been there to assist her. But Hamilton didn't say till the next morning he went to assist her. And he did not learn of the distress until he got back. Hamilton was not there. He did not receive the packet. So where was Hamilton? Of course, Hamilton was with Washington at West Point, studying, looking at the fortifications there, and of course, extremely disappointed because Benedict Arnold had purposely neglected them. Well, I don't know, and I can't answer. This book only covers through 1782. As far as I know, they never met before that. I don't even know if it's possible for them to have met. Franklin, of course, was away a lot of the times. He was in the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, but Hamilton was in New York, and Franklin goes overseas. Hamilton's fighting. They knew each other, of course, at the Constitutional Convention. I don't know of anything Franklin wrote about Hamilton, but again, I haven't studied that period yet in depth, so if there is, I don't know about it. Well, there's a reason they call the military family a family. These people, the aides, the secretary, they really were like brothers. They often write about how they slept together, and they would have open secrets because they would talk before they go to bed. They lived together. Occasionally they would be sent on missions or go home, but they lived together for 12 months of the year. For 4 years, depends on which age. So, Hamilton was with Harrison Tubman for 4 years because they were there when he arrived, and Harrison left shortly before Hamilton. He was very good friends with John Lawrence. He was very good friends with Richard Kidder Meade. He was very good friends with James McHenry, and they often called themselves brothers. And they living together, they were like brothers. Maybe you think they're more like sorority brothers. I don't think they had that much time to party. They were working pretty hard, but they considered themselves brothers, and that's the way I see them. I would love for Hamilton to have been Jewish. Oh, Sergio asked what I wish was true about Hamilton. And of course, I wish Hamilton was Jewish. I am very proud, though, that he is the only founding father to go to Jewish school. John C. Hamilton writes about how he went to the school of a Jewess, where he learned the Decalogue, or the Ten Commandments in Hebrew, while standing on a table. So he's about 5 years old, probably. Obviously, there's that one. But it would be great if he fought in every battle, and I don't know why we have to add to his greatness. He fought at Monmouth, where he won great acclaim. He fought at Yorktown, where he won great acclaim. Of course, he fought at, like I said, the Raritan, Assunpink Creek, probably Princeton. Taking the cannon from the battery. He fought in enough battles. He won his military glory. There's no reason to add to the fictional stories. The answer is probably yes. There are letters between Hamilton and Boudinot. Hamilton calls General Lee a driveler in the business of soldiership, or something much worse. I'm not sure I got that quote exactly right, but or something much worse. So, I mean, what's worse than being a driveler in battle is somebody who purposely loses, which is treason. And then Boudinot replies that, something like it would not be beyond, a reasonable doubt that he would do that. Now, Boudinot had previous experience with Lee when Lee was a British prisoner. It wasn't discovered until years later that General Lee had actually drawn up plans for the British to defeat the Americans. This, I think, was discovered in the 1860s. When Lee was on parole, he met with Elias Boudinot, who was I believe at the time, he was the Commissary General of Prisoners. And Boudinot writes how Lee would tell him things that he wanted to go to Congress and offer to, negotiate a peace treaty. And Boudinot would say, like, he couldn't believe it. He was very jealous of Lee, being a term that, he was afraid of Lee, of what Lee was trying to do. Yet Lee was still popular. He was seen as a great general for some reason. And so Boudinot probably told Hamilton. Boudinot was good friends with Hamilton from Elizabethtown. Hamilton actually wrote a poem for the Boudinots when their daughter died in 1774. So they were good friends. Boudinot probably told Hamilton. Then Hamilton, saw Lee in battle. Well, saw him firsthand. He testified against Lee, and then told Boudinot that Lee was a driveler or something much worse. And Boudinot confirmed those suspicions. Whether they knew Lee was committing treason, that's impossible to prove. But they certainly suspected it, or if you want to say suspect is even too strong a term, they certainly thought it possible. And in fact, some would say thought it likely. So yes, he did think that Boudinot might have committed treason. And later we find out, Lee might have committed treason. Of course, later we find out that he did commit treason at a different instance, and that might have factored into his actions at Monmouth.
Well, thank you to Michael E. Newton, coming from Phoenix, Arizona.